The rain had been falling for 4 days straight. In the sleepy town of Maple Ridge, Vermont, folks in the area were used to a drizzle or two, but this was something else. The North Creek River, usually a lazy stream that wove gently behind people's backyards, had turned into a raging, frothing monster. Ellen Jennings, 67, stood at her kitchen window, a hot cup of tea in her hands, staring at the river that now clawed at the edge of her garden fence. "That's not right," she muttered to herself. The earth trembled with each surge. Local authorities had issued warnings, but no one expected the floodwaters to rise so quickly, so viciously. A few houses down, 9-year-old Liam Porter was outside in his yellow raincoat, jumping in puddles. His mother, Sandra, was inside, making grilled cheese sandwiches, unaware that her son had wandered too close to the edge of the swollen creek. And then it happened. The ground near the bank gave way with a loud crack. Liam let out a scream as the earth beneath his feet collapsed. In seconds he was gone, swept into the violent current, his tiny frame tumbling helplessly downstream. Across the road, a deep bark shattered the silence. A large German shepherd named Shadow, who had been lying quietly on Ellen's porch, bolted to his feet. He didn't hesitate, not for a second. He leapt off the porch and tore down the street, heading straight for the river. Ellen dropped her teacup. "Dear God," she whispered, clutching her chest. "That boy." Shadow reached the edge, just as Liam's head bobbed up from under the water. Without waiting, the dog leapt into the churning flood, and then they both vanished into the rapids. Would your dog risk its life to save a stranger's child? Drop your answer in the comments, and let us know your city or country. We'd love to hear your stories of canine bravery. Now keep watching. What happens next will give you chills. The sound of screaming brought neighbors pouring into the street. Sandra Porter's heart stopped when she rushed outside and saw only Liam's rain boots lying at the muddy edge of the riverbank. "Liam, Liam," she cried, voice cracking. "What happened?" shouted a neighbor. "He was just here. I turned my back for 2 minutes," Sandra sobbed. Ellen ran up, breathless. "That shepherd, the one from across the road. He jumped in after your boy. I saw it with my own eyes." "What, Shadow?" Sandra looked confused. "But that dog isn't ours. He belongs to no one," Ellen said. "He just showed up one day, 6 months ago. Never left, loyal as they come. Emergency services were called immediately. Within minutes, firefighters, police, and even a helicopter crew arrived. A rescue boat was launched, but the current was brutal, pulling trees and debris along like matchsticks. They searched for hours. "We've combed 5 miles downstream," said Officer Dale Carson, his face pale and wet. "No sign of the boy or the dog." Ellen clutched Sandra's shaking hand. "That dog went after him, Sandra. He wouldn't leave that child, not unless he had to." And even as night fell and rescue crews paused their search, one thing haunted everyone who had gathered along the bank. The way Shadow had jumped in without hesitation, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. A stranger's dog, a child, and a river that wouldn't give either of them back. To truly understand what made Shadow leap into that river, you'd have to know where he came from. And the truth is, no one really did. He had first appeared in Maple Ridge during the previous winter. A farmer named Joe had spotted him limping down the snowy road, ribs showing, eyes haunted. Joe left out some food. The dog didn't touch it while anyone was watching, but the bowl was always empty by morning. Little by little, he began to trust people. He'd lie on Ellen's porch in the evenings, guarded Sandra's home when she left for work, walked the neighborhood kids to the school bus stop, then followed them home at 3:15 sharp. People joked that he was the mayor of the neighborhood, always around, but never belonging to anyone. Some said he'd been a police dog. Others whispered he might have escaped from a shelter. Ellen once tried to put a collar on him. He backed away slowly, then licked her hand. "He's got a job to do," she said quietly. "He just hasn't told us what it is yet." Now standing by the river with Liam missing and Shadow gone into the rapids, that job suddenly made sense. He'd been waiting for the moment he was needed. By morning, the rescue effort had grown. Local news vans lined the muddy road beside the swollen river. Helicopters hovered above, and volunteers formed human chains along the banks, combing every inch for any sign of Liam or Shadow. The town felt different, heavier. like the flood hadn't just taken a child, but stolen something sacred from every person watching. Even the wind seemed to hush in respect. Sandra hadn't slept. Her eyes, bloodshot and puffy, scanned the river without blinking. Ellen stayed at her side, silent, one hand on her shoulder. Just after sunrise, Officer Dale Carson came jogging up the road, breathless. "Found something," he said. "Down near Miller's Bridge." The crowd followed. It was a mile downstream, a narrow bend in the river, calmer now, with debris caught in the crook of a fallen log. A paramedic was already kneeling in the mud, pointing. There, stamped clearly in the wet earth, was a single paw print. Large, fresh, deeply pressed, as if the animal had stopped and stood still. "Could be a coyote," someone muttered. "No," Ellen whispered, crouching beside it. "That's him, that's Shadow." "And here," Dale said, crouching, "is something else." He pulled a small yellow object from the reeds, mud-caked but unmistakable. A child's rain jacket, tiny and bright with faded cartoon ducks. Sandra fell to her knees. "That's Liam's. He made it this far," Dale said quietly. "The dog, too." People exchanged glances. A strange new energy stirred among the crowd. Not quite hope, but not grief either. Something in between. A sense that this story wasn't over. Back at the fire station, a search map was redrawn. Shadow had dragged Liam up from the current. Somehow he'd made it to this side. But where did they go? The answer would come from the last person anyone expected. 8-year-old Molly Saunders lived in a weathered log cabin with her grandfather, 3 miles into the woods behind Miller's Bridge. They didn't get much company. The old man liked it that way. But that morning, Molly was out by the chicken coop when she saw something strange moving near the trees. At first, she thought it was a bear. Then it barked once, loud and deep. Shadow. He was drenched, coated in mud, limping, and pulling something with his teeth. Molly screamed for her grandfather. "Papa, there's a dog and something else." The old man grabbed his shotgun and rushed out. But when he saw the sight before him, the weapon dropped to his side. There, beneath the large shepherd's protective front leg, lay a small, shivering boy, unconscious, pale but alive. The old man wrapped Liam in a wool blanket and called 911. Shadow tried to follow them to the house, but collapsed at the porch, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. By the time EMTs arrived, both the boy and the dog were unresponsive, hypothermic, weak but breathing. "He saved him," Molly said over and over, pointing at the dog. "The dog saved the boy." Back in town, the news broke like wildfire. "Missing boy found. German shepherd dragged him from river." Tears flowed freely in the streets. People who had never owned a dog wept as if Shadow belonged to them. And in a way, he did. He was everybody's dog. At Maple Ridge Community Hospital, Sandra clutched her son's hand, like it was the last thread tethering her to reality. Liam was stable, doctor said, but cold, bruised, and barely conscious. Another hour out there, and one nurse began to say, before catching herself, Shadow lay in the veterinary wing just across the lot. Local vet Dr. Marion Green had rushed in without even grabbing her coat. The shepherd's heartbeat was weak. He had several cracked ribs and torn paw pads, but the damage that worried her most was deeper, an exhaustion that went beyond the physical. "This dog," she said softly to Ellen, who had come to sit beside him. "He gave everything, every ounce of strength." "He wouldn't have stopped," Ellen replied, brushing a damp cloth over his head. "Not until that boy was safe." That night, as the wind outside howled and the floodwaters finally began to recede, something happened. Around midnight, a nurse rushed into Sandra's room. "Your son, he's asking for someone." Sandra sat up. "Who?" The nurse smiled. "He keeps saying, 'Shadow.'" Sandra rushed to her son's bedside, heart pounding. Liam's eyes were half open now, cloudy, struggling to focus, but alive. "Sweetheart," she whispered, brushing back his damp curls. "It's Mama, I'm here." He blinked slowly, then whispered, barely audible, "Shadow?" Sandra's tears fell freely, warm against his cold skin. "He's okay, baby, he's okay. He saved you. He's just next door at the animal hospital." Liam's lips curved just slightly. A flicker of peace settled on his pale face. Word spread through the hospital like wildfire. The boy was awake. He was asking for the dog. Ellen, who had barely left the waiting room, limped down the corridor, her cane tapping softly. Behind her came Molly Sanders and her grandfather, who refused to speak much but insisted on being there. Dr. Marion Green entered the hospital's main wing, carrying a bundle of warm blankets, and behind her, walking slowly, stiffly, but with pride in his posture, was Shadow. His left hind leg was bandaged, his ribs too, but when he heard Liam's voice from down the hall, the German shepherd lifted his head high, ears perked. His tail gave a tired, hopeful wag. Sandra stepped aside. "Go on," she whispered. "He's waiting for you." Shadow limped to the boy's bedside, gently placing his chin on the mattress. Liam reached out with one tiny hand and touched the dog's fur. "Good boy," he whispered. "You came back." The room fell silent. Doctors, nurses, neighbors, grown men and women who had seen it all, stood there, holding their breath, watching a child and a dog find each other again. And in that moment, it didn't matter that the river had risen, that the world had turned gray with storm, because now there was warmth, there was hope, there was Shadow. By the next morning, the hospital lobby was overflowing. Reporters lined the sidewalk. People brought flowers, handmade cards, and dog treats. A local bakery donated fresh bread for the staff. Someone even brought Shadow a custom-made medal that read, "Bravest Heart in Maple Ridge." But Shadow didn't care about the attention. He stayed curled beside Liam's hospital bed, lifting his head only when the boy moved or stirred. It was Molly, the quiet girl from the woods, who broke the silence during one of the visits. "He's not just brave," she said, petting Shadow gently. "He's ours now, we can't let him go." Ellen nodded slowly. "He saved this town's heart." Officer Dale Carson stepped forward. "I've been making calls, trying to track down Shadow's origins. He's not chipped. No one's reported him missing in over a year. And honestly, I don't think he was missing. I think he was waiting." "For what?" someone asked. Dale looked at Liam and then at Shadow. For this moment." Later that day, Mayor Penelope Hart arrived, carrying an official document. The press cameras clicked as she knelt beside Liam's hospital bed. "I know Shadow doesn't belong to anyone," she said gently, "but we'd like to make it official. If your family is willing, we want to adopt him as the official town guardian of Maple Ridge." Sandra looked down at the dog beside her son, mud-streaked, scarred, proud, and smiled through her tears. "He's already home," she said. "You're just making it legal." The mayor signed the proclamation, and everyone clapped. Shadow, however, didn't react. He was too busy licking Liam's fingers. Liam's recovery was slow. Doctors said his lungs had taken in too much water. He would need therapy, time, and plenty of rest. But the one thing that healed him faster than medicine was Shadow. Each day, the dog returned to his side. He'd lie still, only rising to nuzzle Liam's hand or rest his head on the boy's chest. One afternoon, as Ellen sat knitting by the window, she heard a quiet voice. Did he almost die? It was Liam. Ellen looked up. "Shadow?" Liam nodded. "When we were in the water, I was so cold. I couldn't move." Ellen set down her yarn. "What do you remember, sweetheart?" Liam blinked. "I fell. The river took me. Then I felt fur, teeth on my coat. I thought I was dreaming." But he held on. He wouldn't let go. His voice cracked. He swam. He kept pulling me, even when he couldn't anymore. Sandra, standing just outside the door, wiped her eyes. "He saved me," Liam whispered. "He gave everything." At that moment, Shadow stood up, walked over, and gently placed his head on Liam's chest again. "I want to be like him," Liam said, running a hand through the shepherd's thick fur. "Brave, kind, never giving up." "You already are," Ellen said softly, "and so is he." A year passed. The town of Maple Ridge held an annual celebration called Founders Day. But this year, something was different. There was a statue in the town square now, bronze, lifelike, powerful. A German shepherd standing tall, eyes alert, one paw slightly raised. The plaque read, "Shadow, he leapt into the rapids so another could live. Town guardian, hero, friend." Liam stood beside the statue, one hand resting on its base. He was taller now, stronger, a little more serious, but with a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Shadow stood proudly beside him.
Healed and healthy.
Wearing a red collar with a tag that read, Guardian Number 1. Crowds gathered, speeches were made, but it was Liam's words that echoed longest. My mom once told me that heroes don't always wear capes. He said into the microphone, sometimes they just wear fur. The crowd went silent. He didn't know me, but he didn't hesitate. He jumped in and he brought me back. Shadow didn't save a boy. He saved me, and I'll spend my whole life trying to be worthy of that. The applause that followed shook the streets of Maple Ridge. That night, as fireworks lit up the sky and people danced in the square, Shadow lay peacefully on the grass beside Liam, tail wagging softly. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was legend. The story of Shadow and Liam spread far beyond Maple Ridge. It was picked up by national television, featured in newspapers across Canada, and even aired in senior community centers. From small towns in Indiana to villages in Yorkshire, in nursing homes and family kitchens, people leaned closer to the screen, eyes misty, hearts thudding, as the footage showed a rain-soaked shepherd leaping into a raging river and dragging hope back out with him. Children began drawing pictures of Shadow. Veterans saluted his statue, and older folks, people who had lived through war, through loss, through heartbreak, smiled and said quietly, "That's the kind of story we need more of." But for Liam, it was never about the headlines. It was about early morning walks with Shadow, down quiet, dewy paths. It was about the soft click of paws on the porch each night, and the way that dog's eyes seemed to understand more than any human could. It was about loyalty. It was about never letting go. One autumn evening, nearly 18 months after the flood, Sandra found Liam on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. Shadow lying beside him, both staring at the stars. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Liam nodded, just thinking.
About what?
He reached down and stroked Shadow's ear. The dog let out a low, happy sigh. "If he hadn't jumped," Liam began, but couldn't finish. Sandra knelt beside him and hugged him close. "But he did, sweetheart, he did. And he'd do it again tomorrow." "Yeah," Liam whispered, resting his head on his mom's shoulder. "That's just who he is." And as the wind rustled the leaves and the stars blinked softly above, the boy and the dog, forever bound by a river's fury and a moment of impossible courage, sat in peace. Because real heroes don't just save lives, they change them forever. Have you ever witnessed a dog do something incredible, something that left you in tears or awe? Share your story in the comments below. Let us know your city or country. And if you've ever known a shadow of your own, we read every word, and so does this community. Like this video if you believe dogs are true heroes. Subscribe for more real, heartwarming stories like this one. Comment your city and tell us what your local hero looks like.